Okay, and welcome back to the last lecture for source analysis. Okay, so on in this assessment, you have the questions, as you know, up front, and here is the marking key that I've broken it down. On your task sheet, this will all be on one big marking key, but I thought it might be useful to break it down so that you understand what it is that you need to put in your answer. Okay, so for the first one, we've identified the message in source 1. Now, what sort of ideas are we seeing? So you just write that out, and you can simply say the message in source 1 is, and then you use your own words. Then what you want to do to get the second mark is really expand on that, but you need to use an example from the source, even if the source is visual. So you might say something, the message in source 1 is that the children are treated badly in the workplace. This can be seen by the child who has his hands dangerously close to the apparatus, or this can be seen from the tired expression on the child's face, something like that. So even if you have a visual source, you must use an example from it. If you have a written source, you can use a little bit of the text. So if we go back to the Henry Ford example, you might say something, the message of source 1 is that Henry Ford wanted to make cars affordable, and then you would go up and find that snippet and quote that. This can be seen when he says, and a little quote, and that's where you get your full marks from. If you just identify the message, then you'll just get the 1 mark without the example. You do the same for source 2. Okay. And this is pretty much the same for the purpose. Identify the purpose. Okay, so, why is Henry Ford talking about affordability? It could be because he would like people to buy more cars. It might be because he is justifying the fact that he, produces them very cheaply. That's justification. That's stating reasons why that you make a decision. So, you just identify the most likely purpose as well. If you're not too sure, that's what you would say. The likely purpose of source 1 is. And then you need to use an example from the source that explains your reasoning. Excuse me. And that is so that you can explain your reasoning. That's really why you might use that. So the purpose of source 1 is to justify why Henry Ford wanted to produce a cheap car, and the example from the source might be a bit of the text saying that he wanted to make it affordable, not just for the wealthy, but everybody, so that they could enjoy the technology and the advantages of being able to travel great distances. So that's sort of what you would do for that one. And you do the same for source 2. So just identify what is the likely purpose of this source, explain it using examples. Okay, so now going to question 5. Excuse me. Sorry about that. We're now looking at the similarities of the purpose, and this can be quite tricky. It's worth a few more marks, and sometimes it can be hard to find where they're similar. So having a look at, if we go back up, I'm just going to flick back up to the practice source, and this will help you hopefully. So source 1 is Henry Ford talking about his life and work. Source 2 is looking at the impact of the discovery of electricity. So finding a similarity can be tricky, and that's why it's really important to think about the questions when you are constructing the source set. So the purpose, we could say here, the likely purpose for this one is to, really justify why Henry Ford is building these cars. And he's going to make the price very low. This one here is looking at people quickly finding ways that made their lives easier, and that kind of helps us out there. So I think you've got to find, the message will help as well, but you've got to find those similarities in there. Okay, so the common sort of idea is that it's going to make life a lot easier, okay? For, blessing of hours of pleasure in God's great open spaces. So that's his justification, and that's the purpose of his text, is to actually say that. The purpose of this text is to actually show how it made these people's lives easier. So that's your point of similarity. They're both, the purpose of both of them is to explain and also demonstrate how life is easier with this new technology. Now, with the contrast, with the difference, there is also a different one, and you can connect to source type. So this is from Henry Ford's book. The purpose of him, again, is to actually justify why he's got his simplest designs, and really look through, a lot of reasons as to why he is constructing the cars like he does. Keeps them cheap, keeps them very similar. And that's the evidence in there. We look back again here at source 2, and again we've got different ways in which electricity has really helped make people's lives a lot easier. But this is a visual source. The purpose maybe, now the likely purpose here is a little bit tricky. So you could actually infer that possibly a likely purpose here would be to show development, or it could be to advertise electricity and how it's worked so well. We're not entirely sure because we've only noticed just a little bit of an engraving. It could be for education, to illustrate how important electricity has. Now, there's a little bit of a small difference there. That might be to illustrate the importance, and this is to justify the reasons why. So again, for that one, you might want to look at the author, and we know that he's explaining and he's justifying his choices, whereas this one is no justification in here. The purpose is simply to demonstrate. So this is more the actions that are around a source, and they're the differences. Now they're going to change. They're going to be really dependent on what you choose. So what you need to choose is something that has some similarities of purpose, but also some differences as well. So you can answer both questions. Okay, and that's the tricky part about it, I think. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Now, let's go back down to our questions. And marking key. So, it's the same kind of thing. Down here. We want to describe the similarities. So you're just really kind of saying, well, this is really how they're similar. And then you want to explain in more depth and detail, and you want to use examples from the sources and really sort of flesh that out, because that's an extra 2 marks sitting in there. The more detailed in your explanation and the more you can really get to the heart of it using an example, that's where that sort of marks load sits in there. So really, similarities, and you work out for each one, and then 2 examples, a good explanation, there's your 4 marks. And same with the differences, exactly the same there. Okay, so now we're on to what we call the context questions, and there's 3 of them that work together, 7, 8, and 9. Now, if we go back up and we use our source 3 back up here, just want to remind you of it. There it is there. That's going to be our source. Now, this is context. It's just what we would probably call a stimulus to actually talk about that time period, not so much about what's always happening in the source. So we know it's about child labourers and the issues around them using machinery. So you might be looking at their conditions. Let's go back down here and let's see that. So having a look at identifying the focus of source 3, that's a nice easy one because it's normally written up the top of the source. The focus of source 3 is the state or the conditions of factories for child labour around about 1903. Okay, and that's worth a mark. Nice and easy. Okay, then you've got to go, what kind of leads up to that? Okay, and this is where you've got to know your information. This is where you've got to know your history. So the causes or events that lead to the focus. Now, the 1 to 4 marks is in the detail. If I can put key dates, if I can put events and people or ideas depending on my source. But what you want is it's leading up to the date. So the relevant events before 1903 is what you want to have a look at. Now you could look at the late 1890s and how children had to work like a 14-hour day, that they couldn't go to school, that they had no breaks, that there were no safety equipment for them. Okay, so you could look at that kind of leading up to. And you only want to just go leading up to. You don't actually want to go too far past that 1903 because then this is the other section here. So in the third question, or question 9, which is still using source 3, you just want to look at what we call the context. So what's happening around about this time? And you can go to sort of short-term impacts as well. So you're looking at about 1903, you want to know the key events. We want to know the key people. We want to know ideas, if possible, dates and places. So really 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This kind of ideas sometimes you might not have, but you want to be pretty much across events, people, dates and places, because that really is your 4 marks. If you can kind of mention one from each section, you'll be fine. And it's the detail. So here, names, dates, places, ideas, key people. If you cover those, you're going to get 4 marks. Okay, so again, finding that source that tells you, about a period of time you know very well. Okay, and then the last one I've just got it down as 10. This is the last 5 marks. It takes you up to 30, and this is how you set out your document booklet. So if the sources are clearly identified with the date of publication, the type and origin of source, and they're set out as per the guide and numbered and set out in a neat and logical manner, you'll get 5 marks. So use this guide, the one I've got up there, that sample, as a template. If you identify them with the date of publication and they're set out and the type, that's fine. But here you're missing the origin. Okay, origin is important. So again, choose a source with a good origin. If you can't find the origin, don't choose the source. Okay, but you get 1 to 2 if you're missing bits. Okay, if they're not clearly identified, if the explanation of origin and publication date is not included. That's why you might want to say circa, because that then technically is approximately around it, as long as you're fairly accurate. But if they're not really set out per the guide, you're missing, key parts of it, then you're only going to get 1 to 2 out of that. And that's kind of that last sort of finishing touch there. So there you have it. I've got a little blurb there. Do you know how to do this? How can I tell him I don't really know? Time to ask a teacher, or of course now you're listening to the lectures. So have a little think about these reflection questions. Do you understand the questions? What are difficult? How do you know you're on the right track? What type of study? How will you write your answers? What type of writing strategies do you have? How are you going to construct your booklet? All that kind of stuff. There's a few myths there at the end. So maybe pop yourself through those as a bit of a tester. Good luck with it all. Your teachers are here to help. I am here to help, and you can go back through these lectures at any point if you need to. Thanks again for listening, and I'm sure that you'll do well. If not, give it your best shot. Happy source constructing.